Hello, everyone. I'm Pinar Givanch, and welcome to What's Wrong with the Podcast. Today, we have the great joy of chatting with Ben Byford. Ben is a Bristol-based creative professional working across AI ethics, game design, and web development. He is the founder of the Machine Ethics podcast, where he explores the social and ethical impacts of artificial intelligence with global experts. Through his consultancy, Ethical by Design, Ben helps organizations develop responsible, human-centered AI strategies. He co-founded Nuclear Candy Games, creating engaging, ethically aware gaming experiences, and has worked with clients like Virgin, BFI, and CEH. He holds an MA in Creative and Cultural Entrepreneurship from Goldsmiths and a BSc in Creative Music and Sound Technology. Enjoy.
One, two, 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 two.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of chatting with Ben Byford. He is the host of the Machine Ethics podcast, and he's a game designer and an AI ethics consultant. Ben, welcome.
Hi, and thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for joining. For our audience, please give us a context to your life, more about your background and how you came to where you are today.
So um, I think people usually say the term kind of like portfolio career. So I've had like one of those careers where I'm just doing lots of different stuff. And to this very day, I really enjoy the opportunity to get to work on different projects. So I've been freelance for about 14 years now, maybe. And I was working as a web designer after I finished university, and I did music technology at university, and then I did a master's in creative and cultural entrepreneurship. So I did these things. So I had this interest in kind of production, music, technology, business, cultural studies, and that, I went into a career of kind of just helping people with designing and building websites. So I had this technology part and this design part. So I did both those bits of the website design process. And then I kind of got more and more interested in business. So I started a company, a startup. Everyone was doing startups at the time. I was in London, and it was like everyone was doing a startup. Let's do a startup. We've got an idea. So we formed this kind of like online service for matching students in universities with businesses. It had a terrible, terrible name, so that didn't really help with our marketing and things like that. But we ran that for a couple of years outside of our normal day jobs. And then we started getting this kind of big data stuff coming in. So this was around mid 20 teens, so 2013, 14. And then really in 2015, it kind of really hit me over the head. And I was like, I don't know, man. It's really interesting. It seems really interesting what's happening with ML. I don't know why I'm doing air quotes, ML, machine learning, air
Yeah.
quotes, for some reason. Like AI started to take off in a big way. There was data, there's this big data idea before that, and then data analytics. And then that kind of all, for me, in that kind of startup world, all transitioned into everyone was talking about machine learning suddenly, as well as Internet of Things, IoT. Um, and so I got interested in that area. And two things happened at that point in my life. It was like one, I started doing more teaching. So I was working for a company called Decoded, and what was great about that is you kind of had to learn all these different stuff around technology, and then deliver sessions like workshops and stuff for companies on all sorts of things like data science, design innovation, and web. There was a little bit of VR, there's cryptography, there's all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was learning all this new kind of stuff to do that. And I was just getting really interested in machine learning and AI. So I started talking to people about it. And after thinking about the trolley problem, I'm sure everyone's heard about the trolley problem, I bet. you've heard about it a million times and you're really bored of the trolley problem now. Um, but maybe we can loop back to that later if you're interested in my opinion about it. Um, and that sent me down this line of what is ethics, right? What is ethics? How does it work practically with technology?
Mm.
How can we kind of build these things into our design processes? How can we think about the social impact of our technologies, all this sort of stuff, this area. And part of making sure that I was on the right track and learning the right things was making a podcast. So
Yeah.
everyone's got a podcast, right? I think 2019 for me was like peak podcast, but I think it's still going. So uh, I saw that you've been doing this podcast for a while, so that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, um, so I started my own podcast, and it's the Machine Ethics Podcast, and it's all about talking to much more intelligent people than myself and trying to kind of learn from them, absorb some of that great learning and experience, and working out what is this thing about technology and social impact and how do we build a society where everyone has a phone now, for example, or AI is everywhere? You know, how does that actually work? You know, are we built for this? Are we having to think quite seriously about how we change how society operates because of these things? And you know, also on a lower level, like how does a company think about actually being more ethical or designing a certain way for hopefully better outcomes? And all these questions, which we've been exploring, and it's been very insightful and interesting, and that's kind of led me down to try and do two things, which is games and games development and AI kind of ethics speaking and workshops and stuff like that, and trying to make that my kind of new thing that I do. Because those things are like kind of my passions at the moment. So again, like my career is a bit all over the place, but at the moment, those are the things I consume, I think about, I make money from, and that's who I am at the moment.
I love that. I mean, I always love like non-linear kind of like career paths, but also I feel like the fact that you had a portfolio or still have a portfolio of things that you do that
Mm,
makes you a better AI ethics consultant in my mind because you kind of need to have that bit broader system, like bigger context view and experience to be able to really talk about practicality of these
yeah,
things or
yeah.
even like what impacts what. So I love that. Well, if we want to kind of touch upon what you're
Mm,
seeing, right? So you've been talking about AI and machine learning since like 2015, right? Like, and
yeah.
so it's your 10-year anniversary. Congratulations.
I know. Oh God.
So
So
I want
long.
to understand your level of depression when you start
Yeah, yeah.
seeing the problem. So what were you observing? What changed, if it changed, or we can get to what's getting better
Yeah,
later,
yeah,
but
yeah.
maybe what's getting worse. Let's start with
Yeah.
that.
Worse. So I think the obvious one, right, and I'm doing some work around this at the moment, trying to highlight this, is the environmental stuff. So
Mm,
the amount of effort people are putting into the amount of data centers, the amount of hardware,
mm,
and this kind of arms race of AI at the moment is producing these impacts on environment, right? And it's sort of disingenuous to say that it's just AI, right?
yeah,
It's you know, it's crypto as well. There's general digital use around the environmental stuff, which is going in the wrong direction, essentially, where we're still producing a lot of hardware. We're still producing a lot of energy to do this stuff, and we're increasing the bandwidth in literal, you know, the literal bandwidth, but also the amount of data centers and all this equipment and stuff like that we're bringing online. When really we should be doing something to mitigate those things. So, for example, you know, the energy story is better if you're running this stuff on renewables, right? So we should be starting there and we shouldn't be going to people like, Donald Trump and going, oh, actually, we need more power stations and we need, what I mean?
Mhm.
There's certain things which are happening at the moment which are kind of are anti progress or environmental progress, which are partly being fueled by that AI story. So I think that it's like we know what the issue is there and we know the solution, but the solution isn't necessarily bigger, more data and more compute, unfortunately, necessarily. And I'm not a big hardware person, so I don't actually know what the full extent of the answer is there, but it's definitely not burning more fossil fuels, right? And digging more stuff out the ground.
Yeah.
That's not the answer. So we need to be a bit more creatively, think more creatively there. But unfortunately, it's also like thinking creatively internationally. So it's a very diplomatic situation as well, because obviously, if China starts doing something, the US wants to do something, and vice versa, and we get into this kind of like dodgy arms race of resource and materials and stuff. Um, so I feel passionate about this area at the moment, in general, um, and I think there are some solutions which we'll come back to in a bit. And I think while I've been doing the podcast, there's been the sea change from there are loads of ML stuff and you can use them to, oh, just use neural networks or deep learning. And now it's like, oh no, just use transformer models, LLMs, language models, and not even just use that. It's no, just use someone's API for that. There's a lot of good work in open source, but as a as a company, you're probably not going to be doing that. You're probably going to go to a supplier's API
Hmm.
for some of these services, and some of these services are more or less better than the others. Um, so I think the story around what AI is and how you interact with it has massively changed over that time, over that 9, 10 years that I've been
Yeah. Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
and seriously looking at it, which is really interesting, right? Because you've gone from having interested technologists like doing stuff to probably less interested technologists implementing someone else's stuff. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and for me as a technologist, I'm like, I don't know if this is a good way of working or a better way. I appreciate these models are big, but can we just do some of our own like making of stuff? Thanks.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about that situation.
Yeah. I mean, um, it's like you go to a restaurant, you're eating something, right? It may taste good, but you don't necessarily know what went into it, right? Or
Mm,
when you get
yeah,
packaged food. Whereas, like, if you also cook at home a little bit, you have a deeper understanding of ingredients going in, right? So if you're
yeah,
allergic to
yeah,
something, maybe you'll have a better idea if something is good or bad for you, if you know the ingredients. Um, and it's just, I mean, I feel like it was a black box, and maybe it's even becoming more of it a little
yeah,
bit,
yeah,
which enables scaling, right? Like, how do you help general population be involved without
mm,
necessarily having the skills or tools? But at the same time, it's everything that is happening is almost like it's like I mean, maybe third iteration, but it's still a prototype, right? So
yeah,
we're
yeah,
like
yeah.
doing beta testing globally on let's see how it's going to impact our systems.
Mm-mm. Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's just like, yeah, like you say, it is happening to us almost like this
Yeah.
thing. And I think one of the biggest, like, there's loads of stuff we can go into there, like about, biased data and biased outcomes and the proprietary nature of these things. What decisions are the companies
Yeah.
making behind closed doors about the sorts of things that they train into the systems, right?
Mhm.
Because there's this idea of big data and then training on this data and then after the fact doing fine tuning on and reinforcing certain behavior, right? Like we don't want to we want to kind of like put guardrails on for certain things. So we would like people not to be able to ask about anthrax. Or so,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's certain things that, what I mean? There's like certain things that like as a company, you're like, we should probably make sure that this system works in a certain way
Uh-huh.
and we don't get in trouble. And as a company, that's what we want to keep working and earn money. Um, so there's these sorts of things that happen, and it would be nice if that was more transparent and
Yeah.
we could participate in that, as a public.
Exactly.
Um, and then having some of that will help with, is this stuff appropriate for certain types of people? Are there vulnerable people or people with health conditions or mental health conditions, psychological conditions, which shouldn't use these technologies, so shouldn't use this specific technology? It has been shown to exhibit this sort of thing
Yeah.
when asked certain, what I mean, encouraging people to do certain actions, or just being spreading harmful information, for example,
Mm.
um, telling minors or people underage certain things that they should do.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like a myriad of like stuff that which is interesting to think about in terms of LLMs. Obviously, the bias thing is more general to kind of machine learning in general.
Mm.
Um, so there's like all these issues, which is why my job and other people in the space is really interesting and it's kind of not going away.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure I had like I was gonna kind of loop back onto something that I've been thinking about. But oh yeah, so I had this TED talk the other day, and there is this misunderstanding about this technology as well, which again like has been forced on us.
Mm.
So there is this issue around, do we actually need it, and is it solving anything?
Mhm, mhm.
Is it a solution without a problem, right? Which I like to loop back on. But in this TED talk, this person was advocating reflecting on your usage of AI technologies.
Hmm.
And part of their reflection should be to ask the LLM itself what it's been trained on and what its capabilities are.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know anything about the LLMs, anything about like putting a load of data into a model and hoping something useful comes out. You can't trust the model. Like if you know what I mean, it's
Yeah.
got data. In that data, it will probably say somewhere, this model has been trained on this data. But that could be fabricated lies. That's just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
information in there. So like fundamentally, I'm like really upset at the moment with like the lack of understanding that people have. And it might be, and it's like, no, that's really bad advice. And you're standing on a stage telling people to do certain things. And it's like, that's like not what you should be doing. Okay, guys, like
Exactly.
don't do that. Like
I mean, yeah,
it's,
but to that point, then it feels like the underlying reason of these problems, right? Like, I mean, yes, people in kind of ethics consulting or, red teaming, trust and safety people,
mm,
um, they're doing like the best they can while being under-resourced and time crunched in all sorts of ways, right?
so some of these things aren't happening. Like DeepSeek, for example, isn't
Yeah,
doing it. Like these things aren't happening in certain places
yeah,
as well, right? And they are fundamentally more dangerous because of that
yeah,
fact. In some of the things that I was saying before.
yeah.
So some of these models are literally not put through those guardrails
Yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah,
same
yeah,
way.
yeah. And then we're like the pace is so fast that for a system to evolve, I
Mm,
mean, right? Like going back to system, like in a healthier way, it has to be
yeah.
slow, right? We don't necessarily, we're humans. We can't digest, reflect, understand, analyze, like in only our like nervous system can do that, but like all the information, like it takes time for us to really make meaning of it and like make sense how it
Mm,
impacts things. So when everything is happening so fast, I feel like everybody has different opinions because you feel like I mean, you need to reach a judgment, right? Because that already
mm,
happened. Now something else is happening. Oh, people are using it. We need to say something about that. So it's too fast. And it's almost like in
Mm.
my mind, it's the visualization is always like putting a bullet train on like historic train tracks, right? Like it's so fast going, but the system, the infrastructure, um, the mind capacity, it's not necessarily, it can't digest it or understand it. And I think that's how, to your point, like then you have higher risk of having people going out there giving bad recommendations.
Yep.
Um, you have like issues like to what you were saying, like should some people be using this? Are we really like pausing and reflecting on that, like the societal
Mm.
implications? I mean, we had a huge case study in recent history. Like, can we just pause and reflect on what social media did? Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
the virtue and vice of like, everything coming out. So can we just like reflect on those for a second? And again, to your point, like, why is the future of humanity in the hands of like a handful of people? Why don't we have more
Mm.
participation? Why aren't people engaged in what potentially might impact their future more? So
Yeah, yeah.
it's
I think I'm also battling with that one, right? Because I think if you were American, not American, okay, that's unfair. If you were a capitalist, right?
yeah,
Um, you would
or a billionaire,
or a
like a
billionaire,
billionaire
right?
in the United States.
If you were like, okay, well, people do have a say, and they say it with their wallets, right? So like, if they are part of the governmental system for like doing stuff, now that wasn't my choice. I wasn't using a
Exactly.
wallet for that, right? So that's one thing. Um, but two, like they are doing it to us with a lot of marketing and advertising and maybe some some kind of odd naughty stuff.
Yeah,
So they are pushing this on us rather. They're kind of solutionizing our life when a solution isn't required necessarily.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so like it's awkward because I really like technology and I like making technology. I like using it. But this massive wave at the moment does feel like Siri, not Siri, Alexa. Do you use Alexa? I've got
Unfortunately,
you've
I
got Alexa.
unplugged it the other day because it decided
Yeah.
to call me out of nowhere. Like,
You
okay.
forgot. Yeah. Do you need me? No. There's someone in my house. But like I think Alexa is like amazing, right? I think it is actually amazing, but it's not a mass market product. And
Mm,
it's so like it is amazing for a certain person who has certain needs, right?
exactly.
But that is not every single household. And I think the transformative nature of AI is overblown.
Mm,
Um, and I think it is one of those things where, yeah, it will be transformative, but does it need to be transformed? I think we've got this issue where we've got these massive corporations trying to push AI on us when, like, yeah, we need AI and we should use AI for certain stuff. And that those ideas of, those needs are going to get bigger and more interesting.
yeah.
But what those needs are right now for the general public aren't very clear, and I don't think are all necessary. And are causing issues, right? And the systems have issues in and of themselves. So um I think, and obviously what I was saying with the environmental issues as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think there's a lot of issues basically.
That's where we wrap up.
Paraphrase.
There's a lot of
Yes.
problems, guys. Bye.
All these problems. Yeah,
Uh,
cool.
but I reflect on, in 1950s, we were shoved down ads that marketed throwaway life. And for us to caught up with the implications of what plastic is doing to our planet, that took some time. And then I think,
Mm,
in design, we always talk about unintended consequences or like even like being mindful of what you put out there sticks, right? The design standards you
yeah,
create stick for like hundreds of years. And so now we have infrastructures built to just produce in plastic, and you're not going to get rid of those anytime soon, even though the consumer is now catching up to the implications of plastic, right?
yeah.
But that took like decent amount of time, and the problem is not going anywhere anytime soon because it's a self-generated problem. And it's again happening, but in
Mm,
tech.
mm,
But I'm wondering, and this is like maybe let's switch to a tone of being like hopeful, and then we can go back to being depressed.
mm,
now, like we're early on, we're seeing implications now, right? We're seeing, it's the data is out there around how much energy, water it uses, right?
Yeah.
Or the biases that we're seeing, or even like, hallucinations or mistakes or whatever we want to call it, like
Mm.
advising people to like get a divorce if they're having relationship problems and things
Yeah.
like that. Like we're already seeing some hints of issues. Do you think it's gonna that can translate into faster action? Would we like, it seems like we're not learning from history, but like, do you think there's an
Yeah. I think mostly it is what I was alluding to earlier. Like in my head, I'm like, I don't think fundamentally people are stupid. So what else is going on here? And I
Yeah.
think there is a incentive misalignment problem um,
Mm,
around capitalism, right? So we are incentivized to there's the whole shareholder thing and companies, but you're extractive, right? The whole thing is extracting as much wealth or resource as possible from that
yeah.
situation. So we're all kind of battling in this situation, and I don't I think that is the problem.
Mm,
A couple of years ago, I did some consulting with a public org on their AI implementation, and it was night and day, right? It was so different because the conversations were about how are we supporting our citizens? Like,
yeah.
is this appropriate for the health of the country? Like, the conversation was just really, really like flipped than you might
Yeah.
see in a corporation. And I don't want to say that all corporations are doing this by default, but they're incentivized to do that, right? They're incentivized to do profit over everything else.
Mm,
Um, and we just need to get to grips with that stuff. And I believe that like actually if we did that, like a lot of the issues with AI would then go away. Like because we'll be less incentivized to be extractive and create these big models to supply solutions to things that we don't really necessarily have. And we will spend more time on healthcare and things that we know that we do want. Um, what is it? Soil health,
yeah.
water security, food security, poverty, general health, cancer, for example. There's like a myriad of things that we should be applying our time and effort to, and clicking on ads and selling more, incremental things over something else.
Yeah.
Th
Yeah. Yeah.
those are not those are not the transformative things, right? Those aren't going to take us into this next century and make us better for it. Those are the things which are extractive, and those are the things which are like trying to enforce us to watch more or to pay more, and it just and a lot of that activity is using resources. So I think we need to
Yeah.
um, try and work out what the resources thing is. I think some of this goes away if we're always if you're like what's it called? Player One, is it called? That book and film.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Something like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So if we decide actually don't worry about it, we're all going to be we're going to go into this digital VR world, whatever. It's different, right? Because
Matrix.
yeah, if we're going to go to the Matrix, the situation changes, right? The
Yeah.
current situation is that we are physically embodied people who go and eat stuff and do stuff and throw stuff away, and like you were saying with the plastics, it was just create all this like rubbish and usage,
Yeah.
and I think if we aligned the kind of the kind of economic and social economic issue around that, I think a lot of our other issues around technology will be alleviated, and then we can actually kind of slow down and go, okay, well, what are we actually doing here? Um, because yeah, I do think it's going to be transformative in the long run, like I was like
Yeah.
saying before. Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
really interesting and cool technology. And I enjoy thinking about it. And all the different things about the transhumanist story and the singularity story and the sentient being story. There's all these different kind of future things around technology,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but we can't get there if we basically destroy ourselves. So I don't know.
Along the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
exactly. It's
like
like,
also like race to the bottom, right? Like, oh, if
yeah,
China did that, we do this. And then in 10 years, we just wipe out the planet.
well,
Um,
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
like
the
Wally, right?
analogies are like, I was in Paris in February for the summit, and the analogies were like Oppenheimer, not in the sense that
Mm,
like we will create
yeah,
a bomb in the end, but in the sense that like it was the fear of, oh, are they doing it? Are we doing it? Kind of pushed to technology in like a in with zero consideration of anything like else
yeah,
about it,
yeah.
right? Just for tech for tech's sake.
Mm,
And we know the outcome. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, that's like it's a really good example because, we have nuclear power stations, and we have this idea that we're chasing nuclear fusion, which is like this dream of really, really clean energy
Yeah,
source, um, and that stuff we didn't prioritize over bombs, right? And
exactly.
that's where we're at. We are currently prioritizing, as far as I can see, like from my Western English
Yeah.
viewpoint, right? Obviously, we have our biases and places where what's it called? Uh, I got my privilege, right?
Yeah, yeah.
From where I'm stood, right, we are prioritizing commerce, and I think commerce is extractive and dangerous to our
Yeah.
health and the environment. So I think we need to think um, about that situation, and I don't have the answer, and I really would love just to turn around to you and go, well,
Well, I think this is the part
I've
where
got this
I came
thing.
in. Yeah. Because okay, so what do designers do?
Mm.
We operate in constraints, right? So like the
Yeah.
constraints are there is a dominant capitalist culture, which looking at the government landscape is not going anywhere anytime soon, right?
Mm.
And therefore also, I mean, in the end, for things to really shift, there needs to be both top down and bottom up push, right? But the top down is not happening. Policy is going to lag. And how the tech giants in US are acting like are like toddlers who are let loose in a candy shop, right? And they're like,
Mm.
"Oh, but don't eat too much." Like that's all
Yeah.
they're hearing. And you're kind of like, "Great, that's going to go well." Um, so that's like with that frustration, right? Like
Mm. Mm.
I'm I started to think way more about, okay, then what does that mean for an individual, right? And
Mm.
I teach ethical leadership at Parsons, and of course with students also it always comes up a lot like how does ethics become practical or how can it
Yeah.
show up in my day to day, right? And I think in the world that we're in now, it's becoming a bigger conversation. Like if you are pushed by capitalism, which in your
Mm.
job probably for technologists is appearing as like your line manager is just pushing you to for a deadline without any
Sure.
consideration of anything. If you don't have any regulation, how does responsibility ethics show up in your day to day? Like what are some
Mm.
micro actions you can take where you, you can have that bottom up influence because what I also want to believe and I do think it's the case because we meet
Mm.
a lot of people in these companies, right? Probably more than like 50% in these companies are also equally frustrated as us, but they're there because they need a job and in the
Yeah.
end they maybe think they also can have an influence.
Mm.
So how can they feel empowered in a way that like can they have their own ethics toolkit, right? Regardless of what your boss or the country is saying, like can it actually get into the room where development happens? I would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think if I was being optimistic, I would say yes, you can have a real impact, and you can do some simple things, right? You can really reflect on the solution space there, right? And
Mhm.
go, there is a big solution space, and what I'm going to explore and find like let's say six solutions, and they're going to be wildly different. And some of them are going to be like privacy preserving solutions, and some of them are going to be selling data or like
Yeah.
making more money. And at that point, you kind of surveyed the environment, and you've gone, well, our company motto is like do no evil, right? Like let's
Uh-huh.
pull on some threads here. Um,
We know how that went.
yeah, exactly. So maybe this solution over here, though it might be the fastest to implement and maybe the most cost effective, we're just going to disregard because it actually doesn't align with the company motto and may down the line actually bite us in the butt. Um,
Yeah.
because it gets out as a PR disaster or something. And at that point, you survey and go, okay, out of the options, I'm going to go with this one because X, Y, and Z. But you've reflected on that process. You've actually used that kind of
Mm,
ethical, moral decision making as part of that process in a
mm,
very simple way. But like you've tried to take that and build it into your process of designing stuff. If I'm going to be, and there's loads of great workshops and processes that you can build into that. So go check those out. There's loads of stuff as a designer you can do
mm.
to try and broaden that solution space out and find all those different things. If I'm going to be pessimistic, I would say you have no power, and the power is in the capital, because, like you were saying, your line manager is probably going to make um, commercial based decisions over social ones. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen all the time. And we are social animals, and sometimes we do things which are good for us.
Yeah.
But often, because of this incentive misalignment issue, we do things which are maximizing profits for the individual company, which might not be the most environmentally friendly, socially friendly, in even just for employees, sacking all your employees off because it's
Mm,
a tax write-off or whatever. Like there's all these things that happen in companies which are anti-social,
yeah.
anti-environmental. Um, so if you have the power to stop any of that or to make decisions based on those things, then I would suggest that in reality, commerce is about supporting um, the continuation of individuals in existence,
Mm,
right? We
mhm,
don't make things for the sake of making money. We make things for the sake of existing because we need
mm.
to subsist on food and water. And nowadays you might put electricity and the internet into those information into those categories as well. Like you could exist right outside of commerce in the forest or something like that, maybe with some friends. You could do that, but it's going to be tough, and you're not going to have access to healthcare and all sorts of social stuff that we have
Yeah.
as backstops now. So I think people need to like wake up to the fact that we've built ourselves this kind of anti-human environment.
Mm,
And there's a lot of conversation about human-centered design and value-sensitive design and stuff like that. But I don't think that's going to help um, if we don't have collective action. And part of that collective action is changing the system. And like you were saying, we've kind of got this bottom-up, top-down approach. And I think the natural world is going to force us into a everything's fucked now, and we have to do something about it.
yeah.
Um, but it would be nice if we all decided, actually, okay, maybe this isn't working. We're going to change these things. And part of what we're going to change is that we're not going to compete on this extractive water thing anymore because
Yeah.
we need water. We're not going to compete on this extractive minerals thing because we need to stop taking things out of the ground and burning fossil fuels and stuff. You know what I mean? It's just like these are
Yeah.
possible things that we can do. Yeah. And we did it before. Like we did it with a good example is we used to have leaded fuel, leaded petrol, which
Mm,
was disastrous for everyone's health. And in most places, we don't have that anymore. And we used to have aerosols, which were
yeah.
literally putting holes in the ozone layer, right? And we've mostly got rid of the most harmful ones of those in everyday products, but we still
Yeah.
have a lot of that, like things like that knocking about. So the possibility space for us to catch up and to do stuff is there. Um, and making decision about like A bombs and H bombs and stuff like that to not use these things is a possibility space. It's part of that
Yeah.
solution. We're
Yeah.
looking at those solutions and we want to be hopeful and
Yeah.
uh, pro-social and pro-environmental actions. And I think we have all the tools to do that. And AI is going to be, part of a solution in finding, how we best organize our resources to supply the most amount of drugs to the right place. AI is good for these things, right? It is
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's not good for it's not there to extract more money from me. In all honesty,
Yeah.
that's what we need to get away from.
Yeah.
Now I've just ranted at you and I'm sorry.
No, I mean, this is, I feel like
Yeah.
these sessions are like therapy sessions at the same
Yeah, it
time.
is. Yeah.
But I mean, I like that because I feel like I mean, there's so many bad news like every day, and I think there's almost like a conscious effort to make sure people are occupied by, bad news, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like in a way that, and they're like some of it is like ridiculous news or even fake news
Yeah. Yeah.
to distract us from the real problems, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of like, I mean, it's Hunger Games. But like I think it is empowering to think about like we have done it in the past around certain
Yeah.
things, right? Or even like banning some use, right? Like we stopped
Yeah.
human cloning research for, a good reason, right? So
Mm.
like I think we need to talk about things that we've accomplished in the past or shift that we've maybe to even like create the space, like can we do it faster this time, right?
Yeah.
Because the concern here is sometimes like aviation and how we regulated that and created safety in that space comes up when we talk about AI, but then it didn't scale as fast, aviation, right? It's not like
Mm.
millions of people were running to the airport to use an unsafe prototype. People actually didn't trust planes for a while. And what gets in our head is that it's more conversational now, right? It's becoming
Mm.
so easy to access. Um, it's the problem starts to grow exponentially. And
Mm.
we have evidence that, social media became more detrimental when it actually reached our pockets through our phones, right? But now, like, everything is in our phones. And so I don't think in history we have an example where there was such speed and scale so fast. Um, which is also the reason why we're seeing the hints of issues and problems already today, because otherwise, like we had to catch up with the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so can we, and then like, but then thinking about these examples where we actually have done something against these things, like some of the bad things in the past, we should not forget that and not totally like give up on that side.
Yeah.
To your
Yeah.
point, like it's going to require both bottom up, top
Mm.
down. I think we should remain cautionary optimists and always try to incorporate ethics into our work and almost like, getting inspired by Kendrick Lamar, like play the game, like while playing the game, like create
Mm.
awareness, right?
Yeah.
Like present a business use case of the most ethical option, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
think as a team, how does this become the more sexy option for senior leadership, right? Like,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
what I often see in industries, like certain levels of fear, either fear of regulation, fear of getting canceled, fear of missing out, like these
Mm.
work. Like maybe think about those things, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I think that goes back to even education, empowering, feeling that there is hope. Like there are possible ways that we can mitigate things or address
Mm.
things. Because if we lose that, right? Like if we get bogged down by everything that's happening so fast, then we're not gonna have the effort to have that show up in our day to day. At least, yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, I mean, you were ranting, but at the same time, I think it was going through our, like, like remembering success successful case studies from the
Yeah.
past, I think is going to be even more important, especially with all the scary news and information out there. So I think
Yeah.
like today for me, like, okay, I can be more mindful of raising examples where we've done, good practice.
Yeah, yeah. I think like in response to what you were just saying, I think it is the positive things that drives us and gets us
Yeah.
excited and passionate. So if you can definitely read more about those sorts of things, and there are lots of good examples from the past. But also just not be apathetic. I think apathy is going
Mm.
to be the worst response, essentially,
Yeah, yeah,
and it can
yeah.
be quite easy to get dragged down with all the negative news. And news does publish mostly negative news.
Yeah.
So hold on to those good things and also be the change that you want to see in the world. Like it sounds really corny, and I'm sorry, but like you as an individual have some power, and you know, it's a bit like what's it, effective altruism. You could decide to gain lots of power in order to have more influence, but just be mindful about the amount of power and influence you have, and where you're putting it, right?
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, you just we want to be like presumably we want to create a world that continues and is habitable for animals and humans, and we want to do that in a way where we are not slaves to our own machines, our own
Yeah.
commercial. Like I don't want to be working all the time. Like I'm sorry, guys. Like this
Yeah, yeah,
isn't the world that we were sold in the 50s and 60s.
yeah.
Like technology will alleviate. It won't just like
Yeah.
create new interesting drudgery. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah.
it was going the wrong direction. So, just like don't buy things. If you don't need something,
Yeah.
don't buy it.
Consume less. That's great
You know,
advice.
it's mental. It's a very strange concept, right? You don't have to have it, whatever it is. And yeah, go and do the things that are going to make you happy. Like go and presumably some of these things will hopefully make you happy. Go and talk to people, go and be with your friends, go and play sports, go and exercise your body, create things. Maybe consume culture and music and
Yeah.
art and all this sorts of stuff. And none of that really has to be extremely expensive or extremely detrimental to the environment. And when you
Yeah.
were talking just a minute ago, sorry, I'll finish my rant in a second, but um, it did remind me as you were talking about like things that we have done in the past, that in the very recent past, when we had lockdowns and stuff like that around the world with COVID,
Mm.
we didn't really go to work, and the world was better off, I have to say. Like our mental
Yeah.
health, not necessarily better off, but like the environment
Environment was
better
good.
off. Like we don't go to work. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I live in Bristol, right? And there's loads
Yeah.
of like graffiti around that just says call in sick, like everywhere. There's like all this like
I
really
love
humorous
that.
graffiti. And it's like, yeah, like the best thing you can do is probably not work. But the social economic situation we live in doesn't enable that for people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think if we collectively didn't go to work tomorrow, that would send a absolutely massive message.
I
And I
can
think,
I can see the capitalist twist happening on that. So that's why we're creating robots so that you don't have
yeah,
to work.
fine. I don't want to work. I told you. I want to like I told you, like I want to chat with friends. I want to make music.
Yeah.
I want to research things about space. You know what I mean? It doesn't require me to sit and not necessarily sit, but like clean 6 hours a day or
Yeah. Or
whatever it
consume
is,
something. It's
or
like,
consume something. Like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like, in ethics, I always think that it's about deciding, it's about reflecting and knowing about the decisions that you have, and some of those decisions are about, better or worse decisions, and
Mm.
and we can get all philosophical about what kind of better or worse looks like, but you're literally reflecting on the decisions that you have to make, and in order to make a certain future happen, right? If everyone decided not to go to work tomorrow, that is a different future for
That's a
us.
huge
Okay.
statement to
Uh,
everybody.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's cool. I think that's an interesting
That's how we wrap
proposition.
up. We call on a global strike
Yeah.
to get a reality check of our situation.
Yeah. And people can pick holes in that. And I'm not advocating that all of healthcare should not go to work. But like most of you don't need to go to work. Like, I'm
Right.
sorry. Like
For those
most
of you
people.
selling products we don't need.
Exactly. Yeah, most people don't need to do the thing that they're doing. I'm sorry. You know who you are.
Well, I love these like series of advice that got even like deeper.
Yeah,
Anything
yeah, yeah.
else you would like to add to that? Well, I guess
Oh
like this
God. Yeah.
maybe for anyone, right? In any, whether they're like a young professional, students, or even like in senior leadership, right? But feel the pressure of the board or,
Yeah.
um, but for those who really want to make progress or shift or even like a dent of change, right? We're not talking about like disruptive stuff, right? We're talking about even influencing an individual.
Yeah.
What would you recommend beyond don't go to work? Well, don't, you
Um,
said like remain empathetic also, like
yeah,
right?
yeah. Reflect on these things. Yeah, I mean, I think well, your original question before was about, younger people and what they should do
Yeah.
and stuff like that at the beginning of the podcast. So if I'm going to say advice to, you just out of uni or something like that, and you're looking
Mm.
to work out what you're going to do, I think, um, if you have power already, if you have like money and capital and stuff like that, because some people do, like these
Yeah,
mad
yeah,
people, some people have stuff, right?
yeah.
I'm not necessarily one of those people, but I'm obviously not destitute either. So, um, you know, figure out where it's best placed to do something interesting and useful with that power
Mm.
that you have there. And some of that might be investing in the right sort of thing. You always,
Yeah.
invest in renewables, whatever it is, do something good with that money. And it might be investing in the arts. It might be, just do something
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pro-social, pro-environmental, would be my advice. And for everyone who hasn't got that or is aspiring for that, just I would do something you love, and it doesn't have to be your occupation. Like if you love playing tennis or whatever it is, get a job, do something useful, play tennis on the weekends, and enjoy yourself. Don't necessarily be aspiring to be a million or billionaire. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
is not that shouldn't be possible. Like, I'm sorry,
Clearly, you have
guys.
more problems when you're one. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah.
you definitely get a lot of pushback in the media and social media and stuff if you are that person. But um, I think we have to aspire to actually to to be more centered around our humanity, I guess.
Yeah.
Trying to find the right words for what I mean here, but um, the aspirations that the ideologies of society have pushed us over the last, like,
Mm.
since I've been alive, let's say like 30, 40 years. Um, they're pushing a certain thing. Like, you want to be rich, you want to have stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we need to challenge those ideologies as well as the immediate, like, interactions that we have with um, environmental destruction and stuff like that. Yeah, so just be like, cool, like, I want to hang with my friends. I want to, like, play games. I want to do these things, and that's fine. And that's really cool. And um, you know, aspire to cure cancer, aspire to make a beautiful play. I don't know. Aspire to do those things. Don't aspire to be Jeff Bezos or whatever, because they're all knobs. So uh,
That's the best advice I've heard on this podcast. Ben, thank you so much. I think we can talk about this all day, but I do want to be
sure.
mindful of your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. If you found value in these conversations, please like our video and hit the subscribe button. Make sure to visit our website, podcast.what'swrongwith.xyz, and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts so you never miss an episode. Please leave us a comment or review, or you can simply tell your friends about us. For more details on our guests, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our handles in the description below. And don't forget to join us next week. See you.